11 and 12 will be our last video. We have reached the end of our review. All right, I'll tell you something. When I started working on this today, I knew this was a lot of verbiage here, and it would be a lot. It's a lot of listing as well. It really started to feel like if you've ever read a book and the book has resolved itself previously, and now you're just getting to the end wondering, why are they still writing? Why am I still reading this? I kind of felt like that. Almost all of this is redundant, and I see why it's redundant, because they're wanting us to look at something we've talked about already from a different perspective. It'd be like if we were talking about, let's say, bad football teams. So we talk about the Cincinnati Bengals, and we talk about them. Then later on, there's one about football teams in Ohio, and again comes up the Cincinnati Bengals. And then there's another chapter called football teams that wear orange, and we talk about Cincinnati Bengals. And there's football teams that are named after animals. Okay, you can go on and on. That's how some of these things are. We've covered these, and we've probably covered the perspective that they're getting at with this as well. So it's going to be a long list here. Hopefully it doesn't go on too long. I'm going to tell you right up front, I'm not going to talk about the test questions I saw, because that's been pretty much the same thing after we got our minds around it. You're going to need to apply these things to somewhere. You'll see a picture of something. This is an example of that kind of thing for all of these. So rather than stop after each slide for time's sake, I'm going to go with that. So this particular topic, the rambling topic, challenges of contemporary agriculture, 234 through pages 241 in the AMSCO book. All right, agricultural innovations, biotechnology. That's a little different than what we've talked about. We've talked about genetically modified organisms, which is coming up next. It's a little different than biotechnology. Biotechnology is coming up with these kind of things. It's extracting stuff like antibiotics and hormones from things for use in pharmaceuticals, or use in manipulating. And the other thing, GMOs. So we often think of GMOs when we think of the plants, but don't forget, when they inject these chickens and all the stuff they do, they're genetically modifying that. Well, maybe not all, mixing with their DNA, but they do things to make these chickens much larger and juicy. And I'm picking on chickens, but they do it with all agricultural products. We've talked about those quite a bit. We've talked about aquaculture quite a bit, and we're going to talk about it more. Moving on, that's growing fish in ranch farms, whatever you want to call them. All right, kind of like here. I wanted to use them for an example on this next one. Concerns over agricultural innovations, sustainability. It's really what this whole unit is really trying to get at. I might call it agricultural sustainability and try to focus it all more like that if we could. It's really what it's getting at here. Can we do these things forever? Is this a process that will eventually wear itself out? That's what they mean when they talk about sustainability. Soil and water usage, right? Overusing it, water shortages plus depleting the soils. And then there's also the fact, the salinization. We've got into all of that. Again, that's where the redundancy comes in. Loss of biodiversity, monocropping, etc. Been there, done that. And then the fertilizers and the pesticides that are used. We've talked about that with the pollution and the runoffs and the different things that it does. I do want to look at this graphic that I pulled up for this, because it kind of covers them all while we're talking about this. So they're going to start doing this, and they decide that they need to watch out for things that might kill the fish on the aqua farm. So they might be, shooting porpoises or I don't think they're shooting bald eagles. No wonder then. Could find they go to jail for that. But you get the point. That they're going to be shooting other things that they shouldn't be, or eliminating them somehow to keep them from their farms. Okay. Some of these had this graphic removed, and I see why now, because the bald eagle. Come on, give me a break. All right, so feeding the things into it, you're introducing all of this non-native species or drugs, things into the area here that might not go in there. So that once it goes in there, some are going to die. All right, some are going to escape, and that becomes a big problem in areas where they're bringing in, a species that isn't local but is very dominant. And then that's a real great way to get rid of biodiversity in our lakes and streams and just totally be, manipulated by whatever this new invasive species is that never would have got here if we didn't bring them. So there's that. The diseases, parasites come out of it, their waste. Okay, all of that, isn't always just talking about sustainability, but it is talking about all these things here, anywhere, not just agriculture, aquaculture, I would say, but in all agriculture. All right, food production movements. These are really kind of the same as the innovations to a way. I just need to make 2 slides, and they did it 2 ways. Urban farming. All right, you see things like this. This is great stuff. I know in Istanbul, which actually might be where this is even. It could be anywhere really, but some of this landscape looks like it might be. They've got a lot of this kind of thing, rooftop gardening and gardens throughout the city areas that the people in the neighborhoods kind of share responsibility and work on. Eliminating the need to import as much food into the urban area that way, giving people more access to fresh and I'm sure the word I'm looking for is on the organic farming. Another way to do that is community support agriculture. Let's say this guy is the farmer and not just the guy unloading the trucks. I don't know which one he is. So he's got a farm somewhere in an area, and people get little packages from him. He comes in and they get their produce from him. They don't go to a grocery store. They don't, or they might do it online through him. But it's grown. Todd is a farmer, and I subscribe to Todd stuff, and Todd brings me a bucket of things for me to use in my kitchen as I prepare meals. That's community-supported agriculture. Kind of like taking the farmer's market, but directly getting from them. Lots of places do things like this that is not maybe directly just a person. I can't think of the name of it yet. There's a lot of freshness or whatever it's called, .com or the app or whatever. I think there's a storm blowing in, but I can't tell. All right. Organic farming got into that. That's just, trying to stay away from the pesticides, all that kind of stuff. I've been organic farming. So I haven't had to use stuff, but my cats have decided that's a real good place to go here lately. So I've been getting lots of organic fertilizer in there on a garden weasel so I can work it into the soil without having to touch it. All right. Value added specialty crop. A value added specialty crop is, let's say Todd takes his tomatoes here and Todd makes some ketchup into them, and Todd puts them in a nice little bottle, Todd's ketchup, and you buy that. Okay, it's kind of taking that next step, the value added step, and not selling to a cannery or a big company doing it yourself. You see this a lot with honey in lots of places. I know our local hardware has some honey some dude makes somewhere around here, and I see that at different places. Jellies and jams. I'm not sure what these are. Here's somebody canning their own olives or whatnot, potatoes straight out. That wouldn't be especially added, I wouldn't think. Wine, you see a lot more of that in areas that aren't traditionally wine growers. They got greenhouses or whatever, and they grow it right there, then they make it, they sell it directly out there. Buying local and eliminating a lot of the waste of the transportation and all that occurs from that. Okay, challenges. Food consumption. On more here. Very similar to the production again. Fair trade. All right, this is reaching out and saying, hey, we as a company or we as a store, we're only going to get our stuff from places with fair trade. And that means that they're going to make sure that the people, the workers have rights, are getting paid a fair amount. They're not abusing GMOs, or not necessarily not using, but not abusing GMOs or pesticides and that kind of stuff. So, it costs a little more because the reason people do those things is you get cheaper food. But there's sorts, many, this seems to be the most common label, many different labels if you were curious what you were buying was fair trade or not. More on it, we kind of already got into that with the thing, the local food movement. isn't always just the agriculture part of it. Restaurants, and they might only get their source from local things as much as they can, and then they're not a chain, so you go to them. Um, and then dietary shifts, a very broad category there, dietary shifts. And it depends, and you can look at it two ways. You can look at the fact that the developing world is becoming more developed, and as they're becoming more developed, their diets are becoming more diverse. So they're eating more meat, more other types of proteins, and that's a dietary shift from the straight sustenance grains they're eating before. Or you can look at it as the developing countries, and the developing countries are getting the into the fair trade or the organic or non-GMO and all that kind of stuff. People are paying a lot more attention to what kind of meats. There's a lot more people going vegetarian for different reasons. Those are both dietary shifts, and they're considering that a movement on this. All right, challenges to end hunger. We've discussed this a little bit before, not so much as some of these other things. All right, food insecurity. It either could be there is no food to be had, all right, or it could just be how do I get access to that food. In the United States, we often talk about food deserts. You've probably heard about the food deserts, parts of inner cities where there's a lot of fast food, there's a lot of convenience food. Trying to find fresh produce, good luck with that, all right, or healthy food. Lots of times that's market driven. People have opened up stores and no one buys the tomatoes and they don't have money, so they have to close. All right, that often gets over. There's not people saying I'm not selling tomatoes in the inner city, even though there's a degree to that because it's harder to get the fresh food in there, but it's market driven as well. Okay, distribution problems. These are the ones we've talked about. Probably the number one problem is you get the food. How do we get it to the people? Like the food desert on a bigger scale, like the food insecurity in the other world where you take it. There's a famine. The UN delivers all this food, and local warlords seize the food and take it and use it to leverage power with the government, competing tribes and stuff like that. That's the major distribution problems that we have. Weather, okay, that's always going to be a deal. And suburbanization, that gets into, really, I think they could have just left the sub off, the urbanization, or maybe said urban sprawl, that is taking farmland. This is the map I tried to show yesterday when it looked awful. I got the better copy of it today. But again, that's showing where farmland has been lost. So I would think that this has more to do in developing countries where there's still subsistence farming, and then as the cities come in, it's taken away from the farmland. Also, I would like to point out with this, when urban centers were initially started, they were started someplace close to markets, which means they were started on good farmland. Right, if we could wipe the boards clean and start over, we might put more cities in places that are kind of deserty because you can't grow food there, knowing that you can bring it in, and then optimizing the farmland. But we're not going to tear down New York City because it's on good farmland or anything loosely like that. So just to give an idea. All right, home stretch here. Economic factors in food production. There are many. Okay, location of processing facilities and markets. We talked about that one a little bit the other day, about moving the ones from the country into urban centers as things changed. The economies of scale, we talked plenty about that. The distribution systems. Don't know if we touched much on government policies. There's subsidies. We really want you to grow these things. We're going to pay. The government's going to guarantee you part of this. Or don't grow this, we'll pay you not to grow it, some of the policies, or some of the things, what you have to do to be able to get your food to market going on. This was a good graphic. It kind of just hits the whole thing here. All right. All of those play into this. I think you can see that out in your brain if you needed to. All right, long and rambling topic done. Underdeveloped topic is next. This topic, women in agriculture. this isn't telling us anything here. The role of females in food production, distribution, and consumption varies in many places depending on the type of production involved. Like, okay, what am I supposed to do with that? I read that to you verbatim so that you know that's what it says. This, and I think it could be developed a little more, but this is how it's developed, is what we have instead. Okay. In LDCs, men are moving to cities to work and women are staying to work at the farms. I've mentioned that before. There were family farms, there were subsistence farming, and suddenly there was the need for jobs in the city. So they don't move the whole family to the city, the man moves to the city. I've mentioned it because I've heard, just don't know what the hard evidence is on this, that a lot of the men aren't sharing what they're making. They kind of abandon their families with that. Now the women are doing both jobs back on the farm. And obviously the kids are working here too. If they can lift a shovel, they're working. All right, probably not in school. Women, that's not grammatically correct, right? Women are less involved where machines have been introduced. I got an extra word in there. So they start to bring in the machinery, and they start to show people in these developing countries how the machinery works. That changes the idea a little bit. I remember this would be like if my dad said, "Hey, I need you to help do this outside with me. One of you boys come in here and help me," and my brother would, jilt to the right and go, "Oh, you're stupid," and then he'd look out the window and find out we were using some power tool or something. He'd come, "Hey, I'll help," because we were doing something cool. Like I could see that. Hey, what do you mean? Somebody brought us a tractor. Oh, well, I'll come home during the weekend. All right, because he wants to mess with that and do the machinery and be a man. All right, and then in agribusiness, that being a bigger thing now, women are involved in that quite a bit. If you're wondering what that means, go to a place where there's a cannery or where there's a slaughterhouse or something like that. You're going to see, just like most places, a fairly 50-50 balance in the workforce. You'll see that. Okay, and then the other, less food preparation, whether it be fast food or you can buy convenience foods at the grocery store, or there's a lot more splitting of chores in developing countries these days. It's not just that change. I've always been the cooker for the most part in the house here. Right? Oh, she tells me I'm number one. Okay, I really do. Most of it. All right, so there we are. That is the last of our reviews here, and carry on good study.